At this point, the meeting is open to board members and visiting officials for discussion. The board is simply verifying that the personnel action was taken in accordance with civil service law and recording it in the records. In this case, the employee will be making a request for a hearing later in the meeting. At that point, the board will consider the employee's request, as well as whether the employee is eligible to appeal to the board. Only regular and permanent employees are entitled to appeal disciplinary actions. If there is no discussion on the motion, the chairman can put the action to a vote.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Let the record show that the personnel action form on Mrs. Jacobs' one-day suspension without pay has been approved.
Mr. Chairman, the next order of business is Chief Simpson's request to call for the competitive exam of police officer and the promotional exams for police lieutenant and police captain. Both employment lists for police officer and police lieutenant are still in effect. The list for police captain will expire in 3 months.
Civil service law requires that the board call for promotional exams like police sergeant or fire captain at least one time every 18 months. All competitive tests, such as those given for police officer or firefighter, may be given as the needs of the service require. Competitive tests must be advertised in the local newspaper at least 4 times in the 30-day period prescribed by the civil service law. For any exam, whether competitive or promotional, notices must be posted on the bulletin boards of each fire or police facility, depending upon the service for which the tests are being given. The board must also contact the state examiner's office to schedule these tests and send them a copy of the posting notices. In this case, there would be a motion and a second to call for the police officer, police lieutenant, and police captain exams as requested by Chief Simpson. If there's an eligibility list in effect, the board can't call for a promotional exam if the same exam was given within the last 12-month period. In the case of the police lieutenant exam, it had been given within the last 12 months, and there is an eligibility list in effect.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a secondary motion that we postpone calling for the police lieutenant's exam.
I second. A secondary motion has been made and seconded to postpone calling for the police lieutenant's exam. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed say nay.
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 The motion to postpone calling for the police lieutenant exams passes. Is there discussion on the main motion to approve calling for the police officer and police captain's exam? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to call for the police officer and police captain exam, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
The next item on the agenda is an appeal by Police Communications Officer Frances Jacobs. Ms. Jacobs indicates in her letter of appeal that the appointing authority suspended her for 1 day without pay for abandoning her post for more than 2 hours on May 23rd. Whenever a regular employee in the classified service is subjected to a corrective or disciplinary action, or even if he feels that disciplinary action has been taken against him, he is entitled to a hearing before the board. The employee has to make the request in writing within 15 days of notification of the action, and the board must grant the hearing within 30 days of receiving the request.
Is there a motion on Ms. Jacobs' appeal?
Mr. Chairman, Chief Simpson has given me information about Ms. Jacobs' disciplinary action that I think the board should discuss in executive session before we continue consideration of Ms. Jacobs' request for a hearing. I move that the board enter into executive session.
There are only a handful of reasons that a public body can go into closed sessions, and this particular motion doesn't give sufficient reasons. Executive sessions only apply if the board were to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of a person, provided that person is notified in writing at least 24 hours before the meeting. To conduct strategy sessions or negotiations with respect to prospective litigation, to conduct investigative proceedings regarding allegations of misconduct, or to conduct exam reviews with the state examiner. If any discussion is to be held on this particular issue, it must be done in open session. If the board grants her request for a hearing, any information the chief wishes to have the board consider should be presented then in an open meeting. He'll have his opportunity to demonstrate at that time that his actions were taken in good faith for cause.
I move that we grant Ms. Jacobs' request for a hearing.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the board grant Police Communications Officer Frances Jacobs a hearing on her one-day suspension. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to grant Ms. Jacobs a hearing as requested in her letter of appeal, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to grant a hearing for Police Communications Officer Francis Jacobs is passed. We will have the hearing on Tuesday, July 10th. Ms. Allen, be sure to advise Ms. Jacobs and the appointing authority at least 10 days before the hearing that they are to appear on Tuesday, July 10th, with counsel if they wish. Also, please be sure to post the hearing at least 5 days in advance in accordance with our procedures and the public meeting laws.
The board's responsibility in conducting hearings like the one Ms. Francis requested is to determine whether the action she is complaining of was taken in good faith for cause by the appointing authority. The board has the same authority as the district courts with regard to subpoenaing witnesses and documents. Both sides have the right to be represented by counsel, but the board is always in control of the hearing. The board could be presented evidence and testimony and will probably hear all sorts of information. But it's important that the board consider only the question of whether the appointing authority had cause to take the action and whether it was taken in good faith. The board has a responsibility to both the appellant and the appointing authority to remain unbiased and must therefore avoid discussing the matter with anyone prior to the hearing. Now we're going to take a look at nominating and electing a new officer within the board. Nominations, unlike motions, do not need to be seconded, although they can be.
Does anyone have any new business?
Mr. Chairman, I realize that it may have been an oversight. However, our former member, Mr. Jackson, was the vice chairman of the board. After Laura's appointment to the board, we now have 5 members. Civil service requires that we must hold an election for the vacant office. Since it's not on the agenda, I move that we add an election of a new vice chairman to the agenda.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to add to the agenda the election of a new vice chairman for the board. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion to add to the agenda the election of a new vice chairman for the board is passed unanimously.
Louisiana's public meeting laws require that any additions to the agenda must pass with a unanimous vote.
Do we have any nominations for the office of vice chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Lieutenant Mary Smith as vice chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate Ms. Laura Smith for the office of vice chair.
The chair asks for other nominations. All those in favor of Lieutenant Mary Smith as the board's vice chairman, say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor of Ms. Laura Smith as the board's vice chairman, say aye.
Aye.
Well, I think you'd have no problem presiding over a meeting in the chairman's absence, so aye. Ms. Laura Smith is the new vice chairman. Congratulations, Laura.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
I second.
Well, Laura, there's no discussion on motions to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today for our Civil Service Board meeting. Being a new board member can be a little intimidating, and even a seasoned veteran can get a little confused from time to time. But we hope that this video has helped you better understand the process. If you have any questions, just remember, everyone was a first-time board member at some point, and no one knows it all. For more resources, visit osc.louisiana.gov. Of course, there's no substitute for direct assistance, so feel free to call us anytime for information and guidance. Thank you, and best of luck.